Long time no see. Hello. Welcome back. Or welcome if you're new. My name is Asha. Can you tell it's been a long time since I've talked to a camera? I don't even know what to say right now. Basically, hello. Welcome to my booktube. I am back. Or at least trying to be back. Today we're going to talk about all the books I read in 2025 as someone who remembers very little about any of the books that I read. So this should be fun. The way I'm thinking that this will work is that I will go through my Fable, which was my app of choice for tracking all of my books this year, and we will just kind of have a quick little chat about each of them. I am the type of reader who reads a differing number of books every month depending on my mood and what's going on in my life. So that means that this year I've read anywhere from 0 books in a month to 15 books in a month. So cool. I also decided about halfway through the year that I was sick and tired of rating books. So some of these I don't have ratings on and will literally be going on pure memory and vibes, as I usually do. Let's start at the tippy top with January. As I mentioned, some months I don't read any books. January was one of those months. So let's just keep on moving to February, which was a much better month for me in terms of reading. I started off strong with one of my favorite books of the year, which was Air by Sabaa Tahir. I love Sabaa Tahir and their writing. I read the Ember in the Ashes series last year and thoroughly enjoyed every book in that series. I thought it was so well written. It is Middle Eastern inspired and just hits the way it needs to hit. Air is actually set in the same world as the Ember in the Ashes series, but later in time chronologically. And it was just such a good book. I think I rated this like 4.5 or 4.75. Highly recommend if you like a good kind of like diverse fantasy read. That one's for you. Next up, speaking of diverse fantasy, The Poppy War, which I had heard great things about and I thought was very mid. I think I got a 3 stars from me. Just not my kind of book, it seemed. I don't know. I think it was like a little too difficult for me to follow and understand. I think it towed the line of like high fantasy in a way that I, one, wasn't expecting and two, didn't particularly want to read at the time. So I think that might have been a semblance of just like wrong book, wrong time. But I also have not picked up any of the rest of the series since then, so maybe it was just wrong book for me. Next was Remarkably Bright Creatures, which was the first general fiction book that I've read in quite some time, and I loved this book. I thought it was wonderfully whimsical, really funny, cute, but still with meaning, pretty easy to read, like great reintroduction into general fiction. Next up is the Touch of Darkness series. Now, if you watched videos from me earlier in the year, I talked a little bit about this Touch of Darkness series, or maybe it was on my Instagram. I don't know. Again, I have a bad memory. But I really enjoyed the first book in this series. It is a urban fantasy Hades Persephone retelling. I thought the first book was great. The second book in the series was what I picked up immediately after, and turns out it was just the same story, but from Hades' perspective instead of Persephone's perspective. My thoughts are, why not make the first book a dual POV, especially if Hades' perspective doesn't give much more information than the first book did? But I gave it the benefit of a doubt, rated it pretty mid, I think like a 3.75, and we carried on about our month. I decided to switch gears and go to a different type of book completely and read Ties That Tether by Jane Igharo. Loved this book, like to the point that I, throughout the rest of the year, tried to get this author's other books from the library, and just like every time they came available, I was not in the mood to read or was reading something else, or my hold like expired before I could get it, or someone else needed to check it out. So we didn't get to that, but love this book. Black romance. Need I say more? Also, black romance was Witchful Thinking. I think this one was by Celestine Martin, if I'm remembering correctly. Hold. It is Celestine Martin. This one, mid. It was like a Halloween witch-themed romance, lightly fantasy. It was okay. It wasn't my favorite. I didn't particularly like the writing The story was fine, but it was okay. Also okay, More Days at the Murasaki Bookshop. I loved Days at the Murasaki Bookshop. I thought it was such an excellent book. It was the first book that I read in 2024. Great start. It's a translated fiction. I really enjoyed the first one, not so much the second one. I think overall, February was a strong start that ended up just fine. March, however, probably one of my favorite reading months. I think March, May, and June were just like standout reading months for me. Some of the best books that I've read in a really long time in these months. And March was actually the month that I read the most books in a singular month, where I read 15 books. I was pretty proud of that. We started off really, really strong with Sangu Mandana's second book, the follow-up to The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. This one was, oh my god, why do I have such a bad memory? It's like embarrassing how bad it is. Hold, please. A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping. That's what it was. Loved this one. This one was an arc that I got to read early. Obsessed. This author just is so good at writing lightly romantic, lightly fantastical books that just make you feel something. Pumpkin Spice Cafe was what I followed that one up with. And this one was, again, meh. I think it was overhyped. I think people loved the like small town feel of this book, but dare I say, I think there were many, many other small town feeling books, romance books, that do a much better job. What was not overhyped in my mind, what was perfectly hyped in my mind, was Metal Slinger by Rachel Snyder. Loved this book. The plot twist at the end. I just keep reading great books and then following them up with disappointments. One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crowns. Three stars all around. I actually thought the second in the duology was better, but could do without. Could really do without. How to End a Love Story, though. That one was good. I really was like in my bag with romance this month, and this one, add a tier list. Diverse romance, just beautifully written. Love, 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 love. Then I decided, hey, I'm feeling pretty good. Remember that Touch of Darkness series that I talked about earlier, and I was disappointed by the second one? Well, I decided to pick up the third one and give it a chance. Should not have. It was a 2.25 star, and that was me being extra generous. I just thought that the main character, Persephone, was so whiny in this one, and I did not think that at all in the first one. Like, truly probably should have DNF'd, but did my very best. Just Our Luck by Denise Williams. Pretty good. I liked this one. 4 stars. Like, cutesy, well written. I liked some of the like topics that it covered in the book, particularly around like diversity and size and confidence, and I just thought it was nice. Then I read Stasia Stark's A Court, This Cruel and Lovely series. This one, super good. I actually think that this series just kept getting better and better and better. The first book was a 3.75 for me. By the end, they were like all above 4 stars. Like, really great series. Really easy to binge. I think I read all of this series within like 4 or 5 days. So definitely a good one if you're just looking for a good all-around fun fantasy series. Also a like, not series, but kind of like interconnected standalones that I really loved was TJ Alexander's like Chef's series. Chef's Kiss and Chef's Choice. Both of these were 4.5 stars from me. Like, really great queer LGBTQIA stories, like non-binary and trans characters, and both super well written, covered really important and sometimes difficult topics in a really fun setting. I loved these books, and like now TJ Alexander is pretty much a must-read author for me. Another new must-read author for me, Sonora Reyes. The Proposal was up there for me on one of the best books that I've read this year. Like, really fun, again, queer story, diverse characters, really talks about like coming out and sexual identity in a really like funny way. I just love when authors can balance important topics with either like humor or cuteness or like reality. And it makes it so lovely to read. And when they have great writing, they can't get better than that. What could get better were my April reads. I only read 2 books in April. And they both were 3 stars for me. Zora Books, Her Happy Ever After, and Lost Love Found were just like okay. Both romances, both diverse romances. I love reading diverse books, if you couldn't tell. And these just were like okay. You know, I think that the like kind of love-ish triangle in Zora Books, Her Happy Ever After just like didn't play out the way that I wanted it to. And not even that, like I don't know. It just like wasn't my favorite. I don't think it was particularly well written, and same with Lost Love Found. It was like cute in some moments, and I liked a lot of the characters in both, but just like something wasn't clicking for me with both of these books. Now we're moving on to May. May was another decent reading month for me. If I were a person to reread books, which I'm not, like I don't know why, but I'm not. Many of these would be on my reread list. Must Love Books is by one of my favorite authors, Shauna Robinson. I don't think I've read a Shauna Robinson book that I haven't enjoyed. This was not my favorite of hers, but definitely still an enjoyable read. She's really great about writing books about books about Black women in particular, and just I love how real it sounds when she writes. It's like if this was happening in my brain, the way she writes is exactly the way it would happen in my head. And I just love that. Kennedy Ryan is another great author. I just really love the strong characters that she writes, and The Kingmaker was full of that. I also was not expecting the cliffhanger that this book ended on, and I think this does an interesting job of talking about billionaires, which is a conversation that I know has come up a lot in the book community, and if there's a way to be an ethical billionaire. And I don't know what my full perspective is. I think that there are very few ethical billionaires in our real life, if any ethical billionaires. And I think this has a really honest kind of conversation on what does that actually look like if it were to happen, and is it possible, and how do you build relationships with someone who has a lot of privilege and a lot of wealth, and really hold them accountable for kind of how their privilege and wealth and how they may have come about that has impacts and effects on the rest of society. So really love that one. Also good romance story to it as well. I love when it mixes all of that, because like isn't that life? You know what I mean? Like we're almost never experiencing romance in a world that's not affected by other things, and we're also not experiencing other things like bad things in a world where there aren't good things and love and happiness. So I like when authors can kind of juggle and balance the two. That did a really good job of that. Then I went on like a really big kind of like romance kick for most of the rest of the month, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Next, what did I read next? Next I read Wild and Wrangled by Lila Sage. This was the first Lila Sage book that I had read, and it was actually the last book in this like cowboy romance series, the 4th book in it. And I really love this book. I gave it 4.75 stars. It was like my first cowboy romance that I have ever read, and really just loved the characters, not only the 2 main characters in the book, but also kind of all of the background and side characters who were featured in the other books previous to this. I just really loved the way, again, the Lila Sage talked about like real life problems in the context of a romance story, and I just obsessed. So then I kept on that romance train, and also was like, you know what, I'm gonna pick up another kind of like hyped author book and series, and did Business Casual by B.K. Borison. And I am so glad that I read this book, because this is the book that made me realize that I have ADHD. And now I am wonderfully medicated for it and feeling really great in a way that I have never felt before. And that, my friends, is the power of reading diverse stories, because even if you cannot identify outwardly with characters or what's happening to them or stories, sometimes reading a book about a character who has a different experience than you, or that you think has a different experience than you, allows you to build connections and bridges and understanding from people that are different than you. And sometimes it can also be enlightening for you in your life, in your world. And this was one of those books for me. Not to mention, I just also really enjoyed the story. Our Infinite Fates was also another story that I really enjoyed. This is an interesting one because I know that some people like call this a fantasy book, and I don't know if I would call it a fantasy book. I think it is a fiction book that has time travel elements. There's also definitely romance involved in it, but I don't think I would call it a fantasy. Maybe that's an unpopular opinion, but it's my opinion. I did enjoy the book, though. I really liked the way that the time travel elements were done in this. It was kind of like these two lives are infinitely woven together, kind of are reincarnated and destined to kill one another in every life that they lead. They are reincarnated in different eras, different countries, different genders, different sexual identities. Like, it is just wonderful, and I think it really asks the question of like, what does it mean to be who you are, and how does that perception potentially transcend time. Then I went back to my girl Kennedy Ryan. I read Can't Get Enough. It was really good. I liked it. I really like the characters in this one. This was another one that touched on kind of like the billionaire, wealthy persona and like person, and how do you kind of like navigate those two things. Thought it was interesting. I liked it. Then I read Back to Me by Katie Duggan. This one was really good. Another romance, another queer romance. Two lesbians falling in love. It's great. Then I did Done and Dusted by Lila Sage. I didn't like this one quite as much as Wild and Wrangled, but still good. The Name Bearer by Natalia Hernandez is a fantasy that I thought was pretty good. This one is inspired by South American culture. I thought it was good. It was almost 4 stars for me. Would maybe read more from the author. Something Wild and Wonderful by Anita Kelly. This was a book that one of my friends had gifted to me probably 2 or 3 Christmases ago, and I had not read it, and I am so mad that it took me so long to read this book because it was outstanding. Moved on to June. We started off mid and progressively got better. Starting with Green Teeth by Molly O'Neill. Kind of a fantasy. Main character was actually like a sea monster, a lake monster, a water monster. Jenny Greenteeth. And it was good. I liked the like unique perspective of getting a non-human character as the main character and kind of like hearing their voice and their thought processes. But I like something didn't click fully for me. It was just like an okay. Triple Sec though by TJ Alexander. I told you TJ Alexander can do no wrong. Did no wrong with Triple Sec. Really fun romance. Like talks about polyamory. I just really love an author who can like take a situation or like an environment that I would not find myself in and make me understand it and relate to it and root for it in ways that I would never expect. The In-Between Bookstore by Edward Underhill was fine. Yeah. The Gilded Ones, though, and that whole trilogy, really, really good. I do think that the trilogy fell off for me. The Gilded Ones was my favorite by far, but, like, still good enough to read. Would recommend. It's YA, so if you're looking for, like, a good YA fantasy for you or a loved one, go for it. Slipstream by Madge Merrill. Also a good one to go for, especially if you love F1. I'd never read an F1 book or romance or anything, though I know they're super popular now and have been for a little while at least, I think, but I really liked this. I know that some people did not think that it was super well researched or written to like actually represent how F1 is, but I don't know enough about F1 to know if that's true or not. I just enjoyed the book. Swordcross was another one that I enjoyed by Freya Marsk. Gay, sword fighting themed, kind of like ambiguous era. Here We Go Again. This one like tugged at my little heartstrings. Rivals to lovers, just a coming together for someone else's benefit, and then they like connect through that experience and fall in love. I eat it up. I eat it up. Futbolista by Johnny Garcia. This, I dare say, was my favorite book of the year. I adored this book. Gay, soccer, romance, coming out, figuring out your identity, college years. It was a good book. Honey Girl, also a good book. Surprisingly so. I did not think I was going to like this one as much as I did, but I really enjoyed the themes of like finding yourself as a Black woman in your like late 20s, early 30s, as I get to be in my mid 30s, I definitely enjoy these types of books more. And while I don't think there's anything wrong with a cutesy little like 18-year-old hockey romance, soccer romance, whatever, like sports romance, like I just talked about loving Futbolista, which is pretty much exactly that. I do like to read books that center stories about women who are more my age and kind of asking the questions and experiencing the things that I'm more experiencing. So I loved Honey Girl. Dream on Ramona Riley by Ashley Herring Blake. Pretty good. I don't think it was the best one that I read in that time in June. I think if I had read it at a different time and not after I had read like 3 or 4 of my favorite romances of the year really recently to that, I might have enjoyed it more. And then the last book that I read in June was An Academy for Liars by Alexis Henderson, which had been sitting on my iPad, which I use to read ebooks, for a very long time. And I finally got around to it. And again, one of those books that I was mad I hadn't read sooner. It was great. I thought it was super fun. Now we're getting into the second half of the year, where I progressively read less and less. Still some decent reads. I started off with Blood Moon, which was an arc, and I did like a traveling arc for this one, where we each got to read the book for a week and then we sent it off to the next person in line. It was really, really fun. I did this with Page 3 YA and Read Magazine and had a blast. I adored this book. Black Vampire Diaries meets Twilight, and it's just great. How to Sell a Romance was next. I thought this one was pretty cute. Then I went to fantasy and I did This Woven Kingdom, which is the first in a series. I kind of liked this one. I thought it was really interesting. I thought the premise of it was interesting. The Secret Crush Book Club by Carmen Lee was one that I really thought I was going to like because I love a book about books, but just this one did not hit for me. The writing just was so off, and like I did not enjoy this one. But luckily followed it up with 2 that I adored. The first was The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. Loved the premise of this book. Like, really interesting fantasy world. However, I did not want to pick up the rest in the series. I don't know why. For some reason, I just felt like satisfied with the story, even though it wasn't a complete like story within this first book. You definitely are intended to read the whole series, but I don't know, this one was kind of like a one and done for me, but enjoyed the first one. And then Blood Over Brighthaven, which was, I know, like very, very popular around this time for good reason, because it is such a good book. Really, really interesting conversation of right and wrong and morality and what is good and what is right. And I hated the main character, but also was rooting for her in a certain way. Just, it really makes you think. I like a book that makes you think, and this one does it. The Dahlgert Dream Department Store is another translated book. This one has a really interesting concept. There are these department stores where you can go and purchase your dreams for the night. The book is about some of the workers who work in this department store. It's really interesting and like kind of asks these deep questions about like our subconscious and like psychology and how do we dream and why do we dream and how dreams can affect the rest of our life. I thought it was pretty cool. Then I did a Christmas in July little moment with The Christmas War Pause by Therese M. Clarke, and I love Therese M. Clarke. I saw her speak at the Columbus Book Festival in 2024. Adore her. I think she's so fun. And this was a really nice read. Heavenly Bodies was another fantasy that was really popular. I saw a lot of people reading it or talking about it this year. I really liked that book, and I'm excited to potentially pick up the second one either later this year or early next year. I thought it was an interesting story and ended in an interesting place, so I'm kind of excited to see where things like progress with the series. I'm not 100% sure that I like what I expect the topic of the second book to be, but we will see. It could surprise me. Then I read Triple Duty Bodyguards, which is a Why Choose romance. My first Why Choose romance. I think I like Why Choose romance. On rotation, it was not my favorite Black romance that I read this year, but like good, decent, fine. And then the last book I read in August, Love and Other Stories, again by Anita Kelly. I just really like Anita Kelly and her writing, and I really enjoyed this story as well. I am finding that I like a story that's set in a food environment, probably because I like food a lot. But this one was set a game show, like a food cooking competition. It was just lovely. Now we're moving into September. In September, I started with The Secret Book Society by Madeline Martin. And also as a note, this is about where I started not reading books anymore. I couldn't bring myself to do it, to be honest. I just this is the point where I started to become disillusioned with creating content around my life and around reading and my reading experience. And I just wanted to read for enjoyment. I didn't want to rank or rate or do anything around it except enjoy it. So I did. And I think it was a really nice break and important for me to kind of take that time to just strip all of the other things around reading away and just focus back on the joy and love that I have for reading. And I think it's taken me in a really interesting direction in my life, which I'm excited to talk more about soon. But that's not why you're here. You're here to hear me yap about the books that I read this year. So, Secret Book Society and The Last Bookshop in London were both by Madeline Martin. These are historical fiction. I actually don't know when it's set exactly. I feel like maybe it was the 1700s or 1800s. Maybe late 1800s if I remember correctly. And it was kind of like this secret society of women who read books in a time where women were really restricted on what they could read. And there were all these thoughts around women and hysteria, and that these books would basically just talked about having rights and freedoms made women crazy. We live in a crazy world. That's what I have to say about that. But that was really good. I love historical fiction, and so this was a nice way to kind of dip my toe back in that. I think for the first time this year, those were the first historical fictions that I read this year. The Last Bookshop in London was a bookstore or actually a library or a bookstore, one of the two, during World War II in London, how people came together over their love of books in a really difficult and scary time in world history. Mom Jeans and Other Mistakes by Alexa Martin was a cutesy little romance that I read. And it was both a romance and also this really interesting commentary on friendship in women. And I really liked the way that they navigated how do friendships kind of stand the test of time when your individual lives change drastically. Then I did Twisted Love by Anna Huang, which I had started probably 2 years ago and never made it through. I understand why people like the book, particularly if you really kind of a more forbidden romance and a darker romance. That's just kind of not my cup of tea. So this one wasn't super interesting for me, and I ended up not continuing on with the series. Also probably because the next 2 books in the series were about the side characters who I probably had the least amount of interest in. And while I could have just jumped to, I think, the 4th and last book in the series, I just didn't want to. And I do what I want. The Bookshop on the Corner was another book about books. This one is about a woman who starts a small town bookshop. It's interesting because it's called The Bookshop on the Corner, which I think was the name that they chose for the US printing, and the bookshop's not on a corner. And that really bothered me for some reason, but overall still a good book. The Cinnamon Bun Bookstore, I decided to go back to the world of Laurie Gilmore and give it another shot. I think I liked this one better than the first one. I think it's because I like the characters and the subplot of this one a lot more. And again, I just love a book about books, so couldn't go wrong with that. Then I went into a world of really spicy fantasy stories. So A Tale of Mirth and Magic, The 12 Hunts of Herculia, Not Falling for You, They Love Me Not, and The Never King. I was just I just need to read things that I care little to nothing about. And these books all fell into those categories. I don't even know how to rate these books. They're just spicy. Peter Pan retellings, Omegaverse, Orc. But do with that what you will. Do with that what you will. Then I went back to historical fiction because I was okay, I've had enough of that. The Underground Library, Another one, World War II, London. This one is the one about the library. The other one I think was actually about a bookstore. I really enjoyed this one. Strawberry Patch Pancake House and A Fellowship of Bakers and Magic. I was in like a foodie mood again, so these are two little cutesy kind of romances. Fellowship of Bakers and Magic has a fantasy element, another food composition element. I enjoyed those books. They were good. Strawberry Patch Pancake House, I think, would be my second favorite in that like Laurie Gilmore small town world. And then Fellowship of Bakers and Magic was just like a good fantasy romance. It is the first in a series, so if you like that kind of thing, this one is good. I think there's at least 3 books out related to that series. Definitely at least 2. Perchance 3. Mardi Gras Meet Cute was by my friend Jessica Booth. This one was really adorable. I have family from New Orleans and in Louisiana, so reading about Mardi Gras and kind of like that culture and that celebration was really, really fun for me. I did enjoy the story in this one too. I think Jessica does a really great job of like creating these romantic stories kind of around moments in time and how people connect with one another. And this one also included characters who were older, like in their 30s and 40s, and as I mentioned, I love that. You with a View by Jessica Joyce was another one that was really good. I really was in like a theme of wilderness travel, finding out about yourself as an individual and falling in love all at the same time this year. So You with a View, Something Wild and Wonderful, and Here We Go Again, all kind of were in that realm, and maybe that's why I like them. Maybe I'm like in some sort of third life crisis and want to find out more about myself by taking some sort of long road trip. Who knows? Sunny Disposition by Deanna Gray was another great one. I wish that this book was talked more about. I think it's starting to be, but I know Outdrawn by Deanna Gray is really, really popular and gets mentioned a lot, but this one was so good. I just thought it was beautifully written and loved the like talking about being a Black woman in an interracial relationship. And last but not least, for October, I did Swift and Saddle by Lila Sage, which was the second, I believe, in that series. I think this one was my favorite. I really liked Ada, the main female character in this. I think in all of the series, even when she was a side character and not the main character, I liked her the most. So it was really nice to read her story. Then in November, I did just a cutesy 3 little books. The Literati by Susan Cole, I thought I was really going to like because, again, it was book related. It's about this woman who works at a book nonprofit who's basically known for giving out this award. But from the moment she starts the job, everything just goes terribly, terribly wrong. And the entire time, I'm like, why don't you just leave? Why don't you ask for help? Why are you still here? And it was annoying to me. And so, like, while it was an okay, decent book, when I don't like a main character, unless the premise of the book is really, really good, like Blood Over Brighthaven was, I can't stand it. The Lost Apothecary, though, is a really good one. This one was actually recommended to me by one of my colleagues at the library because I work at the public library now. More to come on that later in future videos and things, but one of my colleagues recommended this to me and I really, really enjoyed it. It was fantasy, historical fiction related, like 3 main characters, 3 POVs, 2 different eras and centuries. Really like interesting, kind of a mystery element to it too. I really like this like genre blending kind of book. Very good. Last for November was The Teller of Small Fortunes, which is, I would say, cozy-ish fantasy. There's definitely some serious elements to it, but I think it does a really good job in the same way that Sangha Mandana does with her books of like balancing the cozy, the fantasy elements of romance, but really also like slightly more serious topics without being kind of like a full fantasy or high fantasy. Then, so far in December, it is December 13th as I am filming this, I will tell you about the books that I have finished in the current book that I'm reading. We started off the month with Set on You, which is a book that I have had on my TBR for a very long time. It is a romance between a fitness influencer and her gym nemesis. It's really, really cute. I actually really enjoyed the topic of this book around being plus size or curvy or existing in a bigger body and what that means for health and how that intersects with the body positive community. I thought it was very interesting because it's also conversations and things that I've been thinking about in my own personal life and how I navigate my perception of my body as a person who exists in a bigger body, as a person who exists in a body that fluctuates a lot. And I think as we get into changing narratives from like curvy is great, big is beautiful, to diet culture and a perception that skinny is better or best, it's interesting to have those conversations through a romance novel. What I really liked was Trial of the Sun Queen. This one is a book that has been on my radar for a while because it starts off with a like very well-known first line, which just like sets the stage for what is a very interesting story. There is a trial, an interesting mix of your general person who doesn't fit in the world, is expected to save the world kind of thing, but also has some bachelor elements to it, which is an interesting mix. I really enjoyed this book and am excited to read the rest of the series. I am on the wait list, number 1 on the wait list for this book at the library. So I'm hoping it becomes available soon. But in the meantime, I have read Rafi, A Buff Male Nanny, which was an interesting read. I enjoyed the side character, the 2 6-year-old twin girls of the main character and the main character's best friend. Enjoyed them, I think, more than I enjoyed either of the main characters. I liked the premise. It's also a pretty short read. It's like a little over 200 pages. Not as much depth as I would have wanted, particularly because some of the topics that they talk about, being in an interracial marriage that falls apart, how do you navigate divorce with kids, like being a single mom, being a working mom. I just thought that there were some things that could have been discussed more in depth than they were. But again, it was a 200-page book. For what it was, decent. And then what I'm currently reading is Winter Garden by Kristen Hanna. I love Kristen Hanna books. The Nightingale is one of my favorite books of all time. I really enjoy The Great Alone. So I'm excited to kind of be diving back into Kristen Hanna's writing. I do have a sense of where this book is going. We'll see if it ends up going where I think it's going, but I'm enjoying it so far. That is everything that I read in 2025 so far, at least. I think it comes out to be like 84 books so far. I'm reading my 85th book right now. Overall, I've really smashed my goal of reading 35 books this year and have really found some new favorite authors, some new series to continue, and am kind of getting a better sense of like how my reading style and what I'm interested in is shifting. Also, got a reading journal for 2026 that I'm pretty excited about. I've been trying to figure out a system for myself of tracking my reading and kind of my thoughts around books. And I also am trying to use my phone less and use less apps for things unless I absolutely need to, or that the benefits of using an app outweigh the benefits of using another method. And I actually think that something analog, that something that I can hold and write is going to be really good for me. I would love to be one of those cutesy girls that has like a scrapbook style reading journal where I have little printout stickers of the covers of books and really intricate layouts and spreads and things, but I just don't think I'm there yet. So this is how I'm introducing myself to that concept. So I think that it will be helpful for me as someone who still wants to share my reading experience, but doesn't always want to film every moment and reading thought and epiphany that I have. I think this will be a really fun way for me to still share those things with people, but really be able to be present in the moment with my reading. Okay. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little snowy day chat with me, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!